Hey guys, welcome back to Candid Cinema. I'm Amanda, otherwise known as AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. Today I will be reviewing the new Marvel film, yes, new Marvel film, Black Widow. Finally! Oh my god, we have waited forever for Nat to get her standalone film. I personally wanted a standalone film after Iron Man 2 just because her debut was so wicked and we needed to see more of her ASAP. If it wasn't after Iron Man 2, guess when the standalone should have been? After the Avengers. We could have had a prequel about Budapest with Clint and Natasha to kind of establish that relationship and see what it was like before the Avengers. But no bueno. We also did not get a Black Widow standalone after the Avengers. So we got to see Natasha, but I always felt like we didn't get enough of her. We didn't get enough of who she was. And it felt like a very base character and a characterization of who Natasha was. We would get little snippets and move the development along. I just wish there was a bit more for her. She, out of all the women in the MCU, and yes, all the women can get their standalone films. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm just saying, out of everyone, she deserved to have her movie first. Now, what director Kate Shortland did in Black Widow was that she did have a firm grasp of who Natasha Romanoff was, who Black Widow was, in regards to how Black Widow moves. The movements were really fluid. I loved the fight choreography in this. I thought they did a great job. What director Kate Shortland did for Black Widow is that she did make her character a bit more vulnerable than we've seen her. We did see a different side of Natasha, which I was very happy about. It was more family-centric, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it also comes at a point where we've already established the Avengers as family. So giving her an entire additional family as a prequel just didn't sit right with me. Yes, I understand you had to have these key emotional moments, which Kate Shortland did extremely well, but it's almost not a strong enough backstory for a character that is in the OG Avengers, the original 6. I just wanted more from that. I wanted to see more of the Red Room stuff. If you're talking about something that serious that women go through, I think that they should have addressed it a bit more, because it's completely brutal as to how they explained what Dreykov did in the Red Room to these women. So I think that should have been the central focus instead of Familia, you know, not to quote Dom Toretto, but here we are. But yeah, I just think that it was a weird way to show Natasha as a whole person after the fact that you killed her and her story came full circle. Like, at that point, she did love Clint enough to the point where she sacrificed herself for him, knowing that he does have a family, but she found her family with the Avengers. That's the entire point of Endgame. That was her story in Endgame, and you kind of see that development starting from the Winter Soldier as Natasha sees Steve as a friend and that she trusts him and there's an honesty there, and then that builds even more in Civil War. So the Black Widow placement after Civil War, before Infinity War, just does not make sense to me. It doesn't really work for me either, just because it's so past that timeline where I don't want to say that I don't care, but like, it didn't make me care about Natasha more than I already did. It was just like, oh cool, this is what's added to her story. That's awesome. We have a couple new characters. What was the point? What was the point? And I know I sound harsh, but it bothers me that after all this time, Black Widow was used as a setup piece for Florence Pugh as Yelena Belova. Again, I'm not bashing Black Widow, but this is exactly what they did to it. And it's slightly disappointing just because Scarlett deserved better than that. She was fighting for her standalone film, for Black Widow standalone film for a very long time, like 10 years in the making, and then the entire film is to set up another character because she's dead. Why would you do that? Why would you do that? I don't understand. But we get flashbacks, but we don't see her in the Red Room. We don't see that experience. Yes, we've gotten snippets in Age of Ultron, but to be honest, that movie did a terrible job in explaining what the Red Room actually was. So I would have loved to have seen that, her training, all of that leading up to present day Natasha. But we don't get any of that. So it's more of like, Black Widow is associated to the Avengers in this film. The name drops were absolutely like astounding. How many times they dropped Tony Stark, they dropped Cap, they dropped the Avengers in general, they dropped Hulk and all that, like what the Avengers mean, like they dropped Thor, like they dropped those names, and it's like, well, can Black Widow stand alone as a character if you keep associating her with the Avengers? What Florence Pugh does with Yelena is that she makes her her own character. She definitely can stand on her own as Black Widow. But it's because you presented her and you set up Yelena Belova as a standalone character. When we think of Black Widow, we don't think of like anything else but the Avengers. We don't see her as her own person. And I think that's what's really missing from this movie, and it sucks because she deserves better than that. She deserved her own film way back, and that she doesn't need all of these name drops. This is just the way that I'm feeling after watching it and having discussed it. I'm not trying to put the standalone female character down. Do not get me wrong. If you don't feel this way, that's fine. I'm looking at it after 11 years, and then you name drop all of those Avengers in this film and keep associating her with them. Having those name drops just really bothered me. It's like, yeah, we get it. She's an Avenger. We understand her importance as an Avenger, but I want to understand her importance as Black Widow on her own and the impact that she has made in her own community and in what she's done for the world apart from the Avengers, because before the Avengers, she had a life before them. So I just wanted to see a bit more of that instead of her constantly being associated with them. But I'm focusing on the negatives, I'm sorry, but the good stuff, it was very funny. It was funny, but again, the humor undercuts the emotional moments at times. And that is something that Marvel has gotten better at, but this just, was it funny? Yes. Did David Arbor steal certain scenes? 100%, because I was on the floor in stitches with some things that he said. He was hilarious. Okay, he stole it as Red Guardian. I thought he was great. He had great chemistry with Florence Pugh. Florence Pugh was a superstar. Now this is just going to catapult her into a whole world of stardom that I'm so excited for. She's absolutely incredible in this. She did drop the accent a bit, but I loved her. You will fall in love with Yelena Belova, and that is the entire purpose of this film, is to love Yelena Belova. And they nailed it. They did. Who was underused? Rachel Weisz. Shocker. An Academy Award winning actress was underused in a Marvel movie. What else is new? Another thing, guess who else was underused? Taskmaster. Did Taskmaster look wicked as hell? 100%. One of the best suits I've seen in the MCU. Looks so sick. So much potential. So much promise. Underused. Underused. Taskmaster is one of the best villains in the MCU because Taskmaster can mimic their opponent on every single level. We had 2 fights. Then you do not see Taskmaster for the entire movie. I couldn't. I couldn't with Taskmaster. I was so very disappointed with Taskmaster. And I wanted to really love him and to see this character kind of grow in the MCU because there's so much that he can do. Right? But Taskmaster, again, if you really look at where Marvel's going in Phase 4, doesn't really belong because it's like multiverse things, and I don't think that this villain in particular would have a spot in future MCU projects, so it does make sense that it is contained to Black Widow. I do get it. Do I have to like it? No. One of the biggest disappointments in the MCU is definitely Taskmaster, and it hurts. It hurts because I was so excited when I saw him in the trailer. And then what happens in Black Widow, just very underwhelmed. So that's where I'm at with Black Widow. There are plenty of misses, and just to recap, the misses, the negatives, the placement of this film, Black Widow's association to the Avengers, the humor constantly undercuts the emotional moments, Taskmaster was misused, Rachel Weisz was misused, and the third act CGI just was not good either. So those are the negatives. The positives that I have: Yelena Belova, my darling, Florence Pugh, you are a star, my dear. I am so excited to watch you kick major butt in the future of the MCU. Scarlett Johansson, thank you so much for giving us Natasha Romanoff, because this was, you know, a solid send-off to her character. Even though she did die in Endgame, this is a very solid send-off to her character, and just we're blessed that we had you to play her. We really are. So that's another one. David Arbor, killed it as Red Guardian. I want to see more of him. If the stars align with that, that'd be great. He did a great job. So there are character moments that really hold everything together. There are action sequences that I was pleasantly surprised with, that I really enjoyed. The opening title sequence is fantastic, one of the best in the MCU. Really crispy. Sound design was great. Soundtrack was pretty solid. The original score worked really well at times. So there are pros, there are cons. This film is a balance of good and not so good. So I gave Black Widow a 3.5 out of 5. It's a good movie. It's a fun film. It's great for the whole family. Again, to kind of see where Natasha comes from in bits and pieces, to really see how family-centric she really is and where her heart lies, I think was really important. And she has one of the best character developments in the MCU. And there's a finality to it. And I'm happy that we were able to do that for Natasha Romanoff as a perfect send-off. And make sure to stick around for that post-credit scene. I screamed, I got up, I stood up, I almost started crying. It was fantastic. I am so hyped for the future of the MCU. So that post-credit scene is very important. Stay. You guys already know that you should stay. I shouldn't have to tell you, but stay. It is so, so good. Well, guys, that is my review of Black Widow. Thanks again to Disney for giving me the opportunity to watch it early. Appreciate it very much, guys. You can always find me over at AMX NDA Reviews on Twitter, Instagram, and Letterboxd. I'll be chatting up Black Widow this weekend, and I will be on Mama's Geeky's channel doing a live panel discussion on Sunday. I'll catch you guys next time. Keep watching movies.